And now we move to the next panelist, Dr. Ashwin Fernandes, Regional Director for QS Intelligence Unit in the Middle East and South Asia. So, Dr. Ashwin, the floor is yours, and you have 8 minutes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wissam, and a warm welcome to everyone. My special thanks to Akram for inviting me for this event, and to the hosts and sponsors, Shiv University, for making this possible, and to all the delegates who are joining us today. I have tried to take a different approach, so let me start my presentation on this topic, which is world's best educational systems. Before that, just to share very briefly, QS started in 1990 at the Wharton School. In the current year, we employ 500 staff members speaking 40 plus languages, with a truly global presence as a global higher education intelligence provider. Our works are referenced by various global agencies, and we are known as the rankers, as one of the most prestigious world university rankings. We have several other regional rankings we produce, and all the rankings we produce are with the one single mission, which is to enable motivated people anywhere in the world to fulfill their potential by fostering international mobility, educational achievement, and career development. And this is because the one single purpose we have is to enable students to make life-changing decisions, to be an independent, unbiased source of information. And why is that? And that leads us back into the topic, which is we're looking at the world's best higher education system or educational systems, because education is expanding. And we've seen today what we are in 2020 and what will be in 80 years from now. There is going to be a massive expansion in both education and higher education. There's going to be a massification of institutions to meet the demand which is going to be coming in, and there's going to be stiff competition, and that can only happen once there are similar evaluations, when everybody's evaluated on a single level. And as the first speaker mentioned, Dr. Hector, about having English as one of the languages so that everybody is able to compete globally, we would need to have qualifications which are recognized in the international labor market and enforced to establish comparable educational standards and quality assurance system. And that is where I have seen that global rankings, ratings, and accreditations come into play. The first system of evaluation started off in the US in the late 1800s. That went on in 1944, where the government passed a bill to be able to provide and formalize accreditation, and also look at how financial aid was provided to only accredited institutions for students. And in the 1980s, that was further cleared into being able to only provide student aid and address issues of rampant waste and fraud by actually using accreditation as one of the means to comb the educational system. In 2021, today we have seen there are about 37 major rankings, ratings, and accreditation agencies. So we have come a long way, and accreditation has placed itself as being very important. But how do we measure this moving on as this global higher education system increases and becomes so big? So there are a couple of models, and this was covered in a research done by Alexander Austin. And some of the measures Alexander had put forth was maybe the whole higher education system is mystical. And because of the complexity, quality cannot be defined. The other measure could be reputational. We could look at how what people think of institutions and how do we measure that, and whether people having, or institutions having high institutions, are actually delivering better quality. There's also the resource-based method to measure best institutions in the world. And some of the rankings today, which are looking purely at research, are looking at this. There's also the measure of outcomes. And this is purely based on what is coming out of the institution, which includes your students, publications, and sponsored research funding. And finally, the value-based perspective. So here, in terms of what benefits an institution provides to its students. So the best method, I think, what we've seen, which rankings, ratings, and accreditations covers, is a combination of reputational, outcome-based, and value-based to measure excellence. So that brings us to the question is how our rankings and I would in the inverted commas, I would put ratings and accreditation because they're quite similar. And I think both of them are different forms of quality assurance mechanisms that enables the HE system to maintain its quality. It does provide the stakeholders with information to make decisions. And in the case of QS, we would like to provide students with information to make life-changing decisions. Rankings particularly helps realize the potential of an institution. There is no ceiling of where an institution can go to. Accreditation assigns a particular grade, requires minimum standards to be met, and then rankings takes that forward into taking these institutions and helping them achieve much more than what you could do with just hitting the minimum standards. So both rankings, ratings, and accreditation, all three in this case, are benchmarks for excellence. They compare institutions in the world according to various weights. I'm not going to be covering the weights today because I've done several presentations on the methodology, and I think you're probably already aware, and it's easy reading material. So I'm going to be talking of this area. Also, they are available from easily drawn sources from independent third-party databases or even surveys. They often influence curriculum, teaching, learning, and research, and help governments restructure the higher education system. And we've seen how the IOE in this case, or the graded autonomy, or even the NEP places some emphasis on evaluation in the policy documents. And definitely the rankings measure, or most of the rankings measure the research-based outcomes, which will benefit the overall research infrastructure of higher education institutions. So when I have placed this context, the quality in Indian context, we've seen how ranking agencies, we have QS times higher, we have our own homegrown NIRF framework, which is looking to grow international. We have our NAC and NBA and ABET and AMBA coming out from overseas, and IQUIS and ASCSB. QS Stars has been there for a while now, and very recently, for the last 3 years, QS iGauge, Indian College and University Rating, and now school ratings are providing a benchmark of excellence for institutions in India. So I think we have already got the frameworks defined. How do we take these frameworks here on and be able to use them to benchmark ourselves, to benchmark our institutions, and compete with the world? And this is a grim number. When we look at the QS World University rankings today, there are just 21 Indian institutions in the World University rankings, 107 in the Asia University rankings. So we have already adapted, and have all the possible means. And I hope that NEP's implementation in the next few years will take the 21 and multiply that by much more institutions which can get into the ranking, because I know we have the systems. We've looked at in the initial slides how global systems have been adopted in India, but now is the time to see how those systems are used to be able to do better and to not just rank better, but to actually feature better in the institutions. In the latest Asia rankings, India, we've had a slight increase of Indian institutions. The number of citations have increased, the number of students we evaluated have increased, but also I think there is a greater need for competition, because we just had 14 Indian institutions which got featured, new institutions which got featured in the ranking this year. Now, compared to how big the Indian higher education system is and the potential to take it forward, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. So in conclusion, I think what we have to do is start mapping some of the global best practices. We have got the rankings and ratings and accreditation sorted out, or at least we have got the best practices in place. But how do we look at countries like the European Union, which is looking at institutional autonomy, providing greater accountability, and has got cross-border study programs and several other mechanisms. France in particular is providing a lot of joint initiatives and is promoting transparency. US, we've talked about US before, so several countries are doing things very differently. And I think we have got the framework defined. How do we map them to the institutions? And my final slide will be on that. But before that, I would like to talk about the pillars for institutional excellence. So we have definitely, we start from bottom approach here. You need to have the vision, and this is at the institutional level, not the government level. Have the vision, mission, and values defined. How do the programs then build onto that? How do we build content, the competence, the faculty and the students which come into the institution? How do you collaborate? How do you provide access to this education to the masses? And what is the graduate outcomes from there, which is self-assessed? And the crown, definitely the outcome, ladies and gentlemen, is the rank. What is the final path to excellence? We should be looking at planning and leadership. How do we set the goals into becoming a world-class institution? By looking at all these systems we already have in India, measuring the performance and determining the implementation of internal benchmarks. How to use funding, the optimal allocation of funds, and how do we attract funding both from philanthropic as well as from the government? How do the regulatory policies are able to reform entry norms for students? We have several entry tests, and I know that we have the common entrance which is being centralized at the government level. And how does that support the institutions in India to attract top talent? How do we approve the entry of new for-profit institutions like it is there in the West? How do we allow to share resources amongst institutions and eliminating overlapping regulations? The last two, the accountability and governance. How do we make education accessible, affordable, so that it reaches the masses? How do we enhance learning outcomes and strengthen the responsibility of the governing board of the institution is also important. And also research, because if you want to grow into a world-class institution, one of the areas definitely is able to attract to attract industries to be able to collaborate, and that would all happen with research coming in. And how do you promote a good number of the good quality publications and host conferences and adhere to international research ethics and so on. So this is just in 80 minutes whatever we would cover. I've tried to make it as quick as possible, but my final slide to you here is a success is a journey, not a destination. The doing is often more important than the outcome. And I would like to add that the rankings are not the goal of an institution, but the outcome of what an institution is doing. So thank you so much for these few minutes to allow me to share these slides, and over to Dr. Wissam.